Wanted to get on here and hopefully just share and encourage maybe just one person that watched this video. Maybe there's several people that need to hear this video. But we read the very beginning of the Bible when God formed man and put Adam in the garden. He said, "It is not good for man to be alone." We are not created to be isolated. And right now, with everything that's going on, there are so many things happening at one time. Um, and that's what we're seeing in the news media, that many people right now are suffering from depression, anxiety, fear, grief. There's a lot of different things that are really difficult, and there's a couple things in terms of how we process that can be really dangerous for us. And so I want to share a little of my story and hopefully encourage you and let you know that you're not alone, and to encourage you that even though it might be painful, uh, God sees and knows exactly where you are. And as we turn to Him, He loves us. As we believe in Jesus, He loves us, and He has the ability to heal us and to bring us out of whatever we're dealing with. So anyway, my story goes a long way back, and I'll share the shortened version with you. But when I was a very young boy, when I was just 2 years old, my mother and my father separated. My dad moved to Minnesota. Ultimately, this caused abandonment, really an orphan spirit in my life. And I took that personally. I felt like there was something wrong with me as a reason my dad left. And so for my most of my life, really until I surrendered my life to Jesus, I dealt with fear of rejection and of being abandoned. And so I never really had any good relationships, mostly because I pushed everyone away. I had this story in my head that people didn't really love me. They were out to get me. I had all this insecurity, and it was crippling. It was absolutely crippling. I had tons of social anxiety, which I still wrestle with, and a lot of depression. And when I finally surrendered my life to the Lord, I still dealt with this, and had to fight through, and it was a process of getting healed. But one of the things that always stopped and stunted my growth is when I would feel like really rejected, or really like, man, I'm all alone. Nobody loves and cares about me, which some of you watching this, you know how that feels, to feel like nobody loves you and nobody cares. And it is a demonic assignment on your life. I'm telling you, sometimes it's hard to recognize those thought patterns. But once they get exposed, you begin to see that, and begin to see that it's the enemy that's trying to attack and isolate and separate you. Well, anyway, what I would do is when I got into a really bad space, I would, what I call, go into the cave, which means I would just shut down. I would basically kind of hide myself, even though I was still like go to work and go through the motions, but emotionally, mentally, I would pull away from everybody, and I would just be in this place of shame and guilt, and go into kind of a place of depression, and really pull myself back from healthy relationships. The hard part about that, right, is the thing that I was doing to try to make myself feel safe was the thing that was stunting my ability to grow and mature and be healthy. Because what I really needed was to press through that pain and be around people and be open with what I was feeling and accountable. And thankfully, God placed a group of people in my life at the Cedar Rapids House Church Network. Shout out to my best friends and dear loved ones that love me for who I was, regardless. They didn't judge me for all of my brokenness and junk. And so I felt safe there. But I had to make a decision not to ever go into the cave and pull away from relationship, even though it was excruciatingly painful to deal with all the stuff that I had going on inside and continue to be around a group of people, even though I wanted to isolate. And I say that because in this season, especially when we're already isolated, the temptation for those of you that struggle with the same issues that I had and still struggle with today is going to be to go into the cave. And right now, it's the worst thing that we can do. And we can't necessarily, not all of us can necessarily get out and be fully around people, but get on the phone, get on FaceTime, be vulnerable and accountable with people. Get your issues and what you're dealing with into the light. The light is the place where healing begins, not into the darkness. We've got to get stuff into the light. We've got to verbalize it. We've got to bring that stuff out. The second thing that I just want to encourage that I've been feeling in this time frame is grief, and grief over all the different things that have been happening. I've been grieved over the racial injustice and different things that we're seeing, grieved over the state of politics in the nation, grieved over COVID-19 and the politicizing of this as an issue, and all of these different things, right? Just grief. The interesting thing, though, is I didn't really know that I was feeling grief. And here's how I spotted it. When a couple years ago, most of you don't know this, but my father passed away. Never publicized that or anything, but he passed away in 2018. And I tried to process that, but I went through a period of grief. I didn't really realize that I was grieving for still about 8 to 9 months, but I was agitated. I was just experiencing anger and all of these different things. And I couldn't see that until one day I was down in my basement and there was a poster board of my father, pictures of him, and I just broke down and started weeping. And I just all of a sudden realized, oh my goodness, I've been grieving. And I didn't realize that I wasn't actually processing it out. And I wasn't talking about it or working through it with anybody. And so here, in the midst of everything that we're dealing with now, I had about a month-long period where I felt myself just angry and just having all these emotions. Again, I didn't recognize that I had grief and I needed to process. And finally, I saw a picture on the internet and I damn broke, and I started just weeping again. And in that moment, I realized I'm dealing with grief here. And I started to begin to process that out and talk that out. But that could have been a prolonged period. I think it was just the Lord's mercy and grace to show me you're dealing with grief. And I think part of the reason he showed that to me is there's a lot of you that are dealing with trauma, especially I speak to the marginalized communities with everything that's going on. We're being disproportionately impacted by COVID. We're being disproportionately impacted by racial injustice and a bunch of other things. And still a majority of the country still doesn't actually see that pain, right? And we're seeing these images, and there's trauma there, and there's re-traumatizing that's happening. And there's grief, deep grief. And many of us, I think, don't even know what's actually going on the inside. And so it's impacting us. And we've got to begin to unpack that grief and trauma with people and get it in front of the Lord and get it into the light. But anyway, I hope that this at least lets you know that a couple of you watching this, you're not alone. And I want you to know that you are loved, and I want to encourage you, don't go into the cave. Don't isolate further, even if you feel like it, because of the pressure in this season. Don't bury your grief and trauma. Get around people and bring that stuff out into the light. And ultimately, Jesus Christ cares. He has suffered the same He's gone through everything that we could be tempted by. He understands the pressure that we feel in our frail human bodies. And so he is waiting for us to turn to him and ask for his help and to begin to process this out. Anyway, bless you. You are loved. And hopefully this was a little bit helpful to somebody.